In commemoration of Holy Week, culminating on Easter Sunday, and the 8-day Jewish celebration of Passover frequently overlap on the calendar. In the Christian New Testament, Passover and Easter are tied together, while in the Torah, Passover is the story of God's saving of the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. Easter and Passover are two distinct holidays that are often linked together in our culture. I talked with Reverend Jonathan Lawrence, Associate Professor of Religious Studies, Canisius College, about the holidays of Passover and Easter, how each is understood and celebrated within their particular communities, and how each community might respect the celebration of the other's holiday. Hi, Jonathan. What a pleasure it is to be with you today.
It's great to be here, Alex.
And I love it because we can talk and compare notes on our two major holidays, on Easter and Passover.
Definitely. Well, and I wanted to start by sort of asking you, because people always ask me, why does Easter fall when it falls? And they also know that sometimes Easter and Passover are exactly at the same time, and other times they aren't. So Easter is always scheduled for, I had to look up, the first Sunday after the first full moon on or after the March equinox. So it's basically you have to wait till the equinox, and then as soon as the moon comes, then you can have Easter. Is that similar to how Passover is scheduled?
Well, see, there isn't a magic formula like that. It's part of the regular Jewish calendar,
okay.
And it's always on the Jewish calendar. It's always on the same date, which is the 15th of Nisan, the middle of the month of Nisan, when the full moon is.
Right.
But the issue is that because the lunar calendar is 11 days off, you have to add in basically an extra month every couple of years.
Right.
So this year happens to be a leap year. So we get one day on February, but in the Jewish calendar, we have an entire month of what's called Adar that's added in. And so Passover, Hanukkah, was the earliest it could be, and Passover is going to be the latest it could be, basically.
Okay, so this year they're not going to overlap at all then?
No, it totally overlaps.
Oh,
but
okay.
So because it doesn't use that formula, it kind of ends up at the right place. No, Passover, the Sunday at Passover, and first Sunday of Passover, first and Easter, the exact same time. Jesus would have been happy, I guess. It would have been convenient.
That's right. That's right.
So what, because I think the thing is they're both incredibly important holidays. Passover, from a Jewish perspective, is the most important holiday, and I would say Easter, it's the most important holiday as well.
Yes. Yes. Well, sort of theologically, in terms of traditions and practice, of course, Christmas gets a lot too. But in terms of theologically, because it deals with the death and resurrection of Jesus, which then are the central event in terms of the growth of the Christian faith, Easter is more important, but there's a lot more rituals concerning Christmas, you might say.
So it's really interesting because Christmas, it seems to be a holiday that's largely celebrated in the home.
Yes.
And that's how Passover is in Judaism. But it's the most celebrated Jewish holiday, even more, I think, than Hanukkah. And because people love the kind of at-home traditions of it.
That's a good comparison, I think. And certainly there are home events and special foods and a different sort of sense of fasting or changing food. So a lot of Christians, particularly in medieval times, and certain groups still, will refrain from eating certain kinds of foods during the 40 days leading up to Easter. And so then Easter becomes a special time of being able to add all those foods back in. And so in some of the neighborhoods in Buffalo, they still even have, the churches have the blessing of the Easter baskets. And you have the decorated eggs and the butter lambs, of course, and the hams and other things that they all get ready for Easter Sunday.
So it's like they've been holding back
Yes.
from eating, and now on Easter, wow, we can go and bring it out again.
Which is why also Mardi Gras becomes so important just before Lent starts, because the tradition was you had to get everything out of the house, which in a sense I suppose is similar to the practice of having to clean out the house and get all the leaven out of the house before.
Yeah, I don't think you can compare them.
No, not quite as much as celebration.
Just so you know, I'm not. I think all the traditions are wonderful. The cleaning of the leaven is probably the hardest tradition because you're supposed to clean it from your entire household, which is pretty much impossible when we have breadcrumbs in every nook and cranny you could think of.
Right. Now, a lot of Christians over the recent years have sort of discovered the Seder. And I know it gets controversial sometimes because some churches want to do a Christian Seder, which can seem like they're taking it over. But I know that for myself, there's things that through attending Seders at friends' houses, through living in Jerusalem together, and actually we discovered that we were there in the same time. One of the things that really strikes me is the fact that we're talking about history. We're talking about events, in case of Passover, something, 4,000 years ago maybe. For Christianity, talking about Easter Sunday, talking about things 2,000 years ago. And yet we don't just say, well, they're long ago, we sort of remember them, and we're talking about it as ancient history. We express them in modern language. So I know that in the Passover Seder, there's a line that goes something like, we were slaves in Egypt and God rescued us. And that's historically sort of problematic to say, well, somebody living in America in 2019 weren't themselves slaves in Egypt, but they're saying it in a very personal connection to the story. And in the Christian communion, Eucharist, Lord's Supper, whatever you want to call it, there's a line where it says, this is God's body broken for us, God's blood, Jesus' blood shed for us. And it's not just, again, something way back in the past. It's something here in the present. And I find that so powerful because it's a way to connect and not just act like it was something that happened so long ago. We don't need to worry about it.
I think you totally hit the nail on the head. That's really what the holidays have in common, is that these are the central stories, and when we tell the stories, we're living the stories. We don't, in both Judaism and Christianity, there's a sense that these stories are ongoing and that we are really reenacting them in these holidays.
Absolutely. Now, I know we're supposed to be talking about Passover, but also in the Jewish community and in the Christian community, Passover and Easter are followed by Pentecost. And one of the other things that I remember learning when I was in Jerusalem and we all went at Pentecost to study overnight in the synagogue and studying the story of Ruth, and the rabbi there told us that, I like the phrasing, that Passover was about physical liberation from slavery with Moses and the Israelites, and Pentecost was for spiritual liberation with the giving of the Torah. And I always liked that because a lot of Christians criticize the Torah and look down on it, oh, the law is too hard for us to handle. And I like instead the phrasing of it as the Torah as a gift and something that frees us by teaching us how we should live. And this is, again, one of the things that's so great, when we can learn together and still have our own traditions and their own ways of understanding it, but learning more about each other so that we can deepen our practices.
Yeah, I think that's really so fascinating. Just kind of, I was going to say, because you mentioned the time before Easter and all the preparation, and then the counting, what you call Pentecost, what we call Shavuot, which is our Feast of Weeks. And a lot of these traditions go back to the agricultural cycles in the land of Israel, this is the time of the harvesting. But even when we've removed ourselves from that area, we create new reasons to do these different rituals.
That's right. Well, and it was very interesting actually being able to be over there and see that, yes, when Shavuot comes, Pentecost, it is actually the time when the harvest is coming, since around here our seasons and the rainy season and everything and when things are growing kind of differs. One other thing that I did also just want to comment that has always struck me is the line in the Passover Seder about when the Egyptian army is killed, and it says that the angels were celebrating. And God stopped them and told them, well, yes, we rescued the Israelites, but it's a sad thing. It's a cause for mourning that part of God's creation, the Egyptians, should be killed. Even though they had been endangering the Israelites, it's still a cause for mourning. And I think that's an important reminder, particularly even in our own times when it can be very easy to just try to say this person's good, that person's bad, and there's no redeeming value.
Mm-hmm. That's a wonderful, I'm so glad that you mentioned that. That's actually not in the Seder, in the Passover meal itself. It's an extra biblical text we call Midrash. But what we do in the Seder is we take a little bit of our wine. We're supposed to put our pinky or our like a knife or a fork into our wine, and we take a little bit out for the 10 plagues, showing that we should lessen our joy. But I think it's also pointing out that there is a hardship with Passover and Easter being together, because a lot of times through Jewish history, Easter meant a difficult time and a dangerous time. And I think that that's part of the story that's being told. So it's all these layers and layers and layers.
Absolutely. But it's so wonderful to be able to learn together, and I've always enjoyed the chance when we've had the community Seders to come together as a community to participate.
Yeah. All right. Well, pleasure to be with you today.
Absolutely. Thank you.